begin. Are you ready? Okay, let's set our motivation or revive our motivation. Sangye Jodon Zogi Chunam Lai Janchu Badu Dani Kapsuchi Dagi Chunyan Gi Pe Sonam Ki Drola Penchia Sangye Drupa Sho Sangye Jodon Zogi Chunam La Janchu Badu Dani Kapsuchi Dagi Chunyan Gi Pe Sonam Ki Drola Penchia Sangye Drupa Sho Sangye Jodon Zogi Chunam La Janchu Badu Dani Kapsuchi Dagi Chunyangi Pe Sonam Ki Drola Penchia Sangye Drupa Sho. Letting refuge and bodhicitta reconnect. So there's a mental exercise I like to do with pretty much all Buddhist topics, and it lends itself well to group discussion. It lends itself well to journal exercise. It also lends itself well to like just kind of a quiet reflection that's not quite an analytical meditation. And I thought I would just kind of walk you through it in the context of the eight worldly concerns. And for this session, use it as a discussion group prompt. So we first take what we've studied. So what we've studied is limited forms of refuge that lead to more suffering. And we looked at the eight worldly concerns, these pairs of hope and fear. Yeah. And you don't have to like be the scholar of the group who's remembered the whole lit. We're really just talking in terms of attachment, aversion, hope, fear, push, pull, right? We're just talking in those terms and how we're really grasping onto things that are not reliable or pushing away things, giving them much power. Yeah. So then what we do is we take this and we ask ourselves personally, okay, for me specifically, making it really real, your own inner life and heart practice, your own well-being and development. What is my spiritual refuge and how will I connect to it? What is my spiritual refuge and how will I connect to it? And you know, and you're just kind of sitting with not making it any more broad than that, because if you go too broad too quickly, sometimes you miss out on, I guess, the flavor of the teachings. So a very common thing to do with Dharma teachings is to think about how people in your life should really hear this, right? How there's other people in your life who are like, you know what, they should really hear this. My sister-in-law needs this teaching. Yeah, it's a classic. Yeah. And so what we want to start with is, okay, we need this teaching. Okay. And actually, before we even do spiritual refuge, let's do unreliable. Yeah. Let's do what are the unreliable refuges I turn to habitually. So you're sort of sitting with making it really real. And then you expand and you think of family, whether blood family or chosen family, those loved ones you have a close and direct relationship with and responsibility for. And then you ask, can I bring a compassionate gaze when I notice my family relying on problematic refuges? Yeah, so you're taking the personal experience of the eight worldly concerns in whatever combination or whatever, which ones are emphasized. And then you're expanding it to how do I use this information with my people? Yeah. And then you expand to community. So by community, I mean like professional relationships or your immediate community or the world as a whole. If you want to do world as a whole, you can think professionally or you can think just your neighborhood. But what you want to ask yourself is why might reflecting on the eight worldly concerns make me more skillful in public? Right? How might like knowing this is how people are help me when I'm out and about, when I'm doing my errands, when I'm with people, when I'm engaging with society? How can this information help? So the exercise is just to do Personal, family, community. Take one topic and roll it through each of those filters. How do I use this for myself? How do I use this for my family? How do I use this in community? Does that make sense? And it's just a very useful tool for integrating any of the topics that we study so that they immediately are applicable in your daily life, so they don't stay as kind of abstract ideas. So I know group work is sometimes a little uncomfortable, but we're going to break into groups and talk about for 15 minutes. Yeah, 15 minutes. How you relate to this whole concept of unreliable refuges. Unreliable refuges personally, in your family, and in your community. Just kind of talk about what comes up for you. And then we'll come back to the main group and share any insights or any questions that you have. So for the people in the room, I think we can just split the room in half. There's roughly, yeah, same-ish number of people. So you guys can either stay in this room or go into the breakout room, yeah, if you prefer. And folks on Zoom, I'm going to break you into three groups. And just join when you see the little invitation to join. Okay, it looks like we're all back. Yes, all back. So let's do a little feedback. How did that work? What did you come up with? Where were you inspired? Where were you stuck, etc.? Let's start with this side of the room. If we can find the microphone. Oh, you've got it right there. Perfect. Would you like to be the spokesperson?
Would you mind some lessons that?
Not to put you on the spot.
No, not at all. Yeah, I just said that the way that we could come back into the community and serve our community and serve ourselves is to do as one of the very first things you said in the teachings on the last few days is, if you're out in the world with the attitude that everyone's looking at you wrong and they're bumping into you, you might be the cause. So turning that around to I'm in the world with a smile and bringing that to you is how you benefit.
Yeah, beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, other thoughts from your group? Any nuggets? Or parts where you're like, I just don't know how to ... anything like that? What should you talk about? Did you make it personal and think about family and think about community, or did you skip straight to community? No. A little, yeah.
No.
No, it's natural. It's natural. As long as in some way on your own, in quiet moments by yourself, you have some real deep questions, what are my reliable and what are my unreliable forms of refuge? What's short-term, sugar high, quick fix, and actually has been so repetitive that it's my default? And what are my really enriching depth, purpose, meaning, connection types of refuge that are actually more sustainable? And to just kind of have that conversation with yourself very gently and click over into the better form. Yeah, any other bits from this group? When back there?
I realized and I said that some of these refuges are like our self-medication,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
And whether it's looking at Facebook or having a glass of wine, I didn't mean it literally, but it could be any of those things, refuges, and that I would like to be able to kind of skip over some of those, decompress when I get home from my day, and yeah, maybe do a short stabilizing meditation, not even attempt analytical, but just
Yeah.
a short stable, and then let me see what I feel like doing now.
Yeah.
That
Yeah. And it's also important to recognize there's something underneath our knee-jerk kind of comforts. Like if you're going to social media It could be because, you're in a very worldly place. You just want to be entertained and you're looking for interesting images or interesting videos or just something to stimulate you. Or it might be that you're a little lonely and you genuinely want to connect with other humans, right? And if it's actually, I would like to connect with other humans, will this actually serve that? Because it's like a tease, social media. It's like the illusion of connection. It's not real connection unless you get somebody live or you get someone direct. And then, if it's someone you already know and you already have a relationship with, you can message back and forth or you could share photos back and forth and it will make that connection feel very beautiful. But when it's just that kind of passive scrolling, the passive scrolling just kind of eats your attention, makes you tired, and like mildly entertained with a little underlying melancholy. And so, if you can be kind of honest with, okay, what's the need? And is there an effective way of serving that very normal human need? And not just kind of doing the cursory scroll that seems to be connection, but actually often isn't. So, like the strategic use of social media, as opposed to the default, this is what I do when I'm bored thing. Do you know what I mean? Like there's such a difference in the utilizing it the right way because so much of technology is neither good nor bad in and of itself, but we bring our habits to it. So if you pause and say, but why am I doing this? Is there a more intentional way to do this or a substitute that will actually be deeper? And then do the thing, but you're doing it with a lot more purposefully, you know? Glass of wine at the end of the day, obviously not a monastic choice, but a very common choice in this day and age. What's the need? Well, you're all wound up and you want to settle down, right? And then part of you may want a buzz. I don't know. I don't know what you're up to. Um, and being entertained is not the end of the world. And also, if it's via the medium of an intoxicant, it does diminish your inhibitions in a way that might wind up being problematic. And the choices you make under the influence might not be the same choices you would make sober. And it might not be like you're going to go rob a bank, right? But it might be that you're a little careless with your words and you hurt your partner's feelings. It might be that whoever you talk to on the phone that day, they get kind of a more brusque version of you or a little bit kind of careless version of you. So it's not like it's negative in and of itself, but negative comes from it so easily. Is there another way to wind down? Because the need is just, I need to wind down. Are there healthy ways of doing that? So it's kind of like you're not beating yourself up for the urge. You're just examining the urge and seeing if there's a different placeholder that's going to go with more depth, and then you're just really nice to yourself about it and see if you can choose something else. Yeah, this side. What thoughts did you guys come up with? They're voting, Nina.
Thanks, June. For the Zoomers, June just raised her hand and said, I vote for Nina to be our spokesperson.
No pressure. What did you guys talk about?
We spoke a lot about mental health.
Mm.
Some of us struggle with depression and how sometimes even that can be an unreliable refuge. Like that's the safe spot to be in. And this is what we are used to. So we don't want to get better, so to speak.
Yeah.
That's our safe spot. We talked about the need to recognize those 8 unreliable refuges. So having the awareness of them being present, and then it's like even that is very new to some of us, that to kind of hear it and then start connecting it and seeing that a lot of our anxiety comes from that. Also about, funny enough, unreliable refuge being a spiritual practice. So sometimes we kind of hide behind it, and that's our attachment, and that's what we need to be happy and can't be in the world. We're always kind of trying to put ourselves in a
perfect situation and meditate, because that's the only time we feel happy. And then also about the power of shoulds, and the guilt that comes associated with it, and that sometimes we also hide behind guilt, and that the spiritual practice also brings a lot of guilt with it. If we come from the worldly, unreliable refuge and bring those delusions into our practice, then we end up being more miserable than we were before.
Yep.
Although we're there to become happier, so something doesn't work very well. And oftentimes when we think about those 8 unreliable refuges, we find our answers there as well.
Solid. Yeah, well done, team. Yeah. Yeah, and it is interesting the weirdness of having mental states that you don't like depression, but them being familiar. And so there's a comfort in the familiarity, even though you wish you were in a different headspace, even though you want to pursue a different headspace. There's even a fear of trying something different because there's the comfort zone of the familiarity. And it's so normal. It's so common and deserves so much compassion. And to be able to be brave enough to try something different, it can be kind of a trap to frame it in that way. Like, come on, try something different. You can do it, like a pep talk. It's more like treating it very delicately, like if you were training a small parakeet to stand on your finger. Yeah. And it's like, do you know what? If you stand on my finger, we could go outside. You could explore the whole living room. Maybe eventually you could go into the big room and then you can fly and then, blah, 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 but you have to first get on my finger and I have to trust that you'll come back to my finger. And the parakeet's like, I don't want to, I'm going to bite it. And I'm going to stay in my cage, even though I'm bored in my cage and I want to fly around the living room. And you seem nice and you give me food, but I'm used to my cage. This is kind of like us with a lot of our mental states. It's like, I'm used to my cage. I don't like my cage. Don't try and get me out of my cage. I'm going to bite you. Yeah. And how do you train a tiny little parakeet? You have to kind of very gently, very patiently say, this being close to you is safe. This little finger is not going to hurt you. Okay, what if I put it right by the branch you like? Okay, I'll just wait. Everything in its own time, right? And then eventually little foot goes on, little foot goes on. You're like, yeah, we can stay here. It's okay. Now you're just on the finger. Now look, it's moving. It's okay. It's like, no, 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 I'm gonna bite you. Right? So if you move too fast, you do yourself a harm. You have to really gently coax your heart into new layers of openness and new ways of thinking. And if you were to just go in and grab the bird and chuck it outside, it'd be like, oh, flap and flap and flap and never go back in the cage and not know where to find its food and water. So we don't want to be abrupt with ourselves. We don't want to be punishing towards ourselves. And practice takes such a huge amount of patience that we often just get grumpy and resort to living in our cage. So if you can kind of give yourself some sort of metaphor, some sort of analogy where you're like, this is going to take incredible patience and incredible kindness to get myself to do something differently. I cannot expect myself to change overnight. It's not fair. It's not fair to expect myself to change overnight. You don't expect a tiny baby to know how to walk overnight. You don't expect a toddler to learn how to talk in perfect sentences overnight. So it's really gently encouraging yourself. And you encourage yourself from a place of, I have Buddha nature. This mental continuum has the ability to develop. Then it's not egocentric and it's not about achievement and it's not about the I, right? It's much more about, let's make this river clean. Let's get it to the ocean. Let's make this mental continuum free of its hangups. Let's get it to the Dharmakaya. Do you know what I mean? So gently, gently. Yeah, examining those comfort zones that aren't even that comfortable, right? They're just familiar. Yeah.
Yeah, what also helped people in our group was teachings on impermanence. Like they mentioned that, like there's this feeling of being stuck, and then you suddenly, everything changes all the time. So also the bad stuff will go away. So it's not the kind of sad part, which usually we associate the impermanence with, but the happy part, that also the bad stuff will eventually go away, and that kind of gives this feeling of flow and everything being in constant motion, so we're never stuck,
Yeah.
basically, and that can be very helpful. And another helpful thing that somebody mentioned was not identifying ourselves too much with what's in our minds, like to create this separation and to understand that our beliefs and opinions and problems are exactly that. They're just stories in our mind, and not to identify ourselves with them so much. And that also was very helpful for many of us to overcome different issues that are connected with, the anxiety and feelings that come in our minds in connection with those unreliable refuges.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful.
Did I forget anything? June, did I pass as a spokesperson?
Well done. There's applause from our group. The spokeswoman has achieved.
You wanted to add
that.
something?
Don't shit all over me. It also came from their group. Well done. It's a great group. That's fun. You guys are really, it's so important to have these conversations, because you also realize how, different ways of processing the same information, different ways of collaborating with each other and connecting with each other. So if you can, it might seem nerdy to have Dharma conversations, but it can be just like the most enriching thing if you can kind of get this ease with, let's talk about ideas, people, instead of, events and, gossip. And so, like, let's talk about ideas and how do we process and integrate them. And you guys have done really beautifully. And I'm sure this is not the first time. So thank you for your efforts there. I think the piece about thoughts and not believing everything you think is really, really an amazing offering that Eastern religions give to us. Because I hear a lot of people when they come and talk to me one-on-one about their practice being very distressed about intrusive thoughts. Thoughts that they're not proud of. They might have random, really weird thoughts even pop up, violent thoughts, or, weird sexual stuff comes up, or strange sort of like, I want to kill myself. No, I don't. They have weird, intrusive thoughts, and then they freak out and build a whole story about it. And it's like, it's just a thought. If you give it energy, it will grow and repeat. If you let it die a natural death, another thought will take its place. And to not get distressed at what comes up in your mind, but to just kind of be like, useful one or not? Yeah, give it energy, let it die. And not like, who am I that I would have such a thought? Don't build a whole identity around your train of thought, because we have countless stimuli coming at us from all sides, from our past that we don't even remember, past lives, or even just, last week. We have a past life we don't remember of last week. What did you have at breakfast on Thursday? I don't know. Maybe eggs. But if you can kind of get into this habit of noticing your own mental arisings as something that you can work with, not something you are, right? Your thoughts are not you. They're responses from countless causes and conditions. Now decide what you're going to do with them. Don't build a story around them. It can be so liberating, because of course there are also thoughts that you used to think and you don't even believe anymore, but can kind of kick in when the conditions are right. And then you're like ashamed of yourself. Say you used to be someone who was really mean about, I don't know, people of color, right? You were really, because you were brought up in a family that was really racist. And then you grew up and you grew out of it and you educated yourself and you're like, that is a terrible worldview. And then in a tired moment, when someone cuts you off in traffic and you notice the person that cut you off in traffic happened to be a person of color by chance, unrelated to their driving skills, right? Your mind just immediately went to some bad place. And then you beat yourself up and you're like, I'm such a terrible person. You're like, no, it's a habit. Cut it out. It's just a habit. It's so if you try and build too many excuses or build too many reasons, you often wind up doubling down on the unfortunate trains of thought. And you almost invite them to come back again and again. If you can be objective about your own experience, you've got a lot more flexibility and creativity for change. So noticing the 8 worldly concerns, you don't want to bring a lens of judgmentalness and be like, oh yeah, I am getting obsessed with comfort again, or I am getting obsessed with entertainment again, or oh, I am worried about reputation again. Don't add to it, what is wrong with me? Don't add that. It does not help. Go, oh yeah, and that doesn't work. Drop it. Right? It's a very different vibe than having a whole like story around it. Does it make sense? Zoom folks, did you have some thoughts that you came out with, just kind of popcorn style? Unmute yourself. What did you guys talk about? Were you able to get into groups? The breakout groups worked. I think they did. Yes, okay, good. Part of what you were saying in the beginning, you know, about food and about conversation, because this can be really useful kind of red flags for us, is when a normal behavior turns into a binge behavior. Like, what is the threshold when it tips into binge? Like, you could even use the example of, you know, in modern life, I don't know, the last 5 years, 10 years, I don't know how long we've had streaming services. You know, it used to be like if you watched TV and your show was over, it was over. Now the show need not ever be over, right? You could just keep watching a show until all of its seasons were complete. And your 8 worldly concerns mind really thinks that you will be 5 times as happy with 5 episodes instead of 1, you know? But there, it just like, you know, it dips. And then by the end of your, you know, your episode binge, you're sort of like embarrassed at yourself, overtired, your eyes hurt, and you hope no one noticed, right? Or something, right? So that kind of binge behavior that we really see very obviously as something that we didn't grow up with because we didn't have the opportunity. You know, there was no Netflix in the 80s. So if you think about what is the binge behavior for certain kinds of conversations, for certain kinds of eating habits, for certain kinds of whatever, because there's the version of it that actually is not particularly problematic, right? You have one Hershey kiss is not the end of the world. You have one Hershey kiss and you feel the attachment mind co-opt that experience. You will want the whole bag before you've even finished one. You don't even enjoy the one, right? You enjoy the first bite of the one, already anticipating the whole bag. The conversation, you're having a fun conversation, you're laughing, you're joking, then you're talking about ideas, and then attachment mind starts to co-opt it. And it's like, please stay, don't go, please stay, don't go, please stay, don't go. What do I need to do to get you to stay and not go? Binging behavior. You know, what do I do? Do you want to be fed? I'll feed you if you stay longer. You know, what presents if you stay longer? You know, like you're trying to bribe people to stick around, you know, and it's normal and human. But if you can kind of feel in, you know, wherever context is the easiest to point to, when it tips from not problematic to problematic, when it tips from normal to binge, that is the tip from just kind of a moment of utilizing something ordinary into a real 8 worldly concerns dependency. And an 8 worldly concerns dependency is what really disempowers you and just wastes your life energy. So can you kind of feel that, like the binge threshold? This is what we're looking for. Then you're not also triggering deprivation mentality that says you're not allowed any Hershey kisses ever again because now you're a good Buddhist with no worldly concerns. It's like, no, now you can have a Hershey kiss and enjoy the whole thing and be like, well, that was great. Moving on. Okay, so binge behaviors are good red flags for us to catch. And we might not ever watch Netflix or watch anything in particular. It might be as simple as you start reading a book and you were just going to read one chapter and then you fell into it. You know that feeling of when you're reading and then you fall into the book and it sucked you under and you feel some sort of necessity to keep reading. It's pulled you. We might even look for books that do that on purpose, right? We're looking for a book that'll just suck us in. And if you can remain objective and you can remain spacious such that you can put it down at any time with no wrench feeling, it's all right. But you know, what we're trying to capture is those moments where it gets really afflictive. And now the potential is for your heart to shut down and not consider others. So what if you've fallen into the novel and someone interrupts you? You're mad at them. They've taken your happiness, right? Whereas if you're just reading it in kind of a gentle, objective way, enjoying it, and someone interrupts you, you're like, oh, hi, right? And your response to them can maintain lovingness, openness. So if you notice whatever behavior you're doing, if you were to be interrupted, how would you respond? That is a very good litmus test if it's tipped into eight worldly concerns. If you could be interrupted and respond with compassion, you're doing all right. If you get interrupted and you'd respond with rage, uh-oh, right? So know that one. You can do that with computer tasks. It could be wholesome computer tasks, needed computer tasks. It could be emails that you've been putting off for ages and you're really glad to get them done. It could be your Christmas cards. Things that are not problematic in and of themselves, right? But then your attachment mind has co-opted them and ruined them. Yeah. So notice, what would I do if I was interrupted? Can I be interrupted? What about your meditation practice? Can you be interrupted? I was thinking about the Tibetan Lamas. If you've ever spent any time with Tibetan Lamas, the way they are with their practice is so natural and it's so like not pretentious. They do various meditations, various prayers, various prostrations, various ritual things, and it's interspersed with daily life so just in such an ordinary way. And I was thinking about like when I would travel with my teacher, who's one of these, antique lamas in his late 80s, who's so beautiful. When we'd all travel together, there were just people in and out of his room all day, getting stuff, doing stuff, giving him cups of tea, taking plates away, asking him questions, in and out. And he'd be doing his prayers and practices the whole time. And you'd just knock and he'd go, ugh. That was the sign to come in, right? Throat clearing. If you know Tibetan lamas, it's a classic throat clearing. You go in, they have too much phlegm. It's the butter tea. Anyway, you go in, and they would just stop their prayers and be like, something, and you tell them the thing or ask them the thing or get the thing or get the thing, and then they just go back to their practice. Like they were so interruptible. It wasn't a big deal because their practice is their life. It just takes different forms at different parts of the day. And even looking after my teacher now, he's had a stroke, and so he's using a wheelchair, and half of his body isn't working, and so he needs more assistance and page turning assistance and moving things assistance. And so when I've been able to go to Australia to look after him for brief periods of time, it just reinforces the beauty of not being pretentious about practice, because he has to like wait for someone to turn his pages, right? Or like to hold the incense, like, because one of his hands is working fine and the other one's not. And that he's like not dramatic about it. He's just doing his practice. And there's something so relaxing about being with that. You don't feel like you have to be on eggshells. You just kind of like move a limb, move a page, hand him some incense, go about your business. He continues, and there's the indication to come over. So then you come over and you're like, something. He's like, 1 cup of tea. You're like, all right, go make a cup of tea. He keeps praying, keeps praying. We get so precious about our practice sometimes. Now is my meditation time. Shh, everybody, you know, or you're in a retreat and there's like construction next door and you freak out. It's like, it's life, it's normal. So the ability to be interruptible is a really good green flag, right? It's a really good sign that your practice is doing well. The ability to be interrupted and to maintain a compassionate mind. Now, you don't want to go so far as to be like anyone, anytime, anything, and then you never get anything done. But when you're looking at anything in your life that you're getting precious about, the 8 worldly concerns have co-opted it. Do you know what I mean by like you've gotten precious about it? And it really, you just have to be very awake to yourself. Why am I doing this? Not take it for granted that the first reason was good, so then today's reason is good. You have to ask yourself each day, each session, what is my reason? And adjust when necessary. It's not like you have to magically be thinking the right thing or magically have the right motivation. That actually doesn't work. What you want to say is, what is my motivation in this moment? Oh, today it was just kind of phoning it in. Or today it was kind of chore-like. Let me adjust it and remember why I do this for all these deep and vast, important reasons. Recalibrate, continue. Yeah, so don't expect yourself to have a perfect motivation. In fact, usually we don't. That's why we so often say in Dharma centers, adjust your motivation. Or, we say set your motivation, but there's also just adjust, like acknowledge, oh yeah, I came in because I had planned to, right? But it could have just been like it was a fun thing to do on a Saturday. That's the reason you might have come in, and that's like totally normal. And now can I deepen it and expand it, adjust? So you just have to be a very awake to your own motivations and really, really genuinely stop worrying about how you come across, how you're seen, what people think about you, while at the same time leveling up on being polite, being considerate, being compassionate. Feels like a paradox, but it's not. The depth of practice then starts to inform the external behaviors. And you're not proving anything to anyone by performing your practice. That's what we don't want to do, is perform our practice. It has to be real. Yeah. Okay. So when we're looking into reliable sources of refuge, we could continue on the what's wrong forms of refuge and why do we have them. The short version of the whole story of why do we have the 8 worldly concerns: self-cherishing, self-grasping. So self-cherishing refers to how we try to protect ourselves by fixating, how we put up walls so we won't have to feel discomfort or lack of resolution. And this is really a powerful statement because I think a lot of the time we're trying to resolve something that is unresolvable. We're trying to finish a story in our head or finish a sentence or get a relationship to a certain spot. And now, okay, we're resolved. And sometimes that's possible, but often there's hanging threads of, so and so and me just never get each other about this one issue. Oh, well, we get each other about these issues. You know what I mean? This kind of like hunger for resolution, this fear of discomfort, this is all driven by self-cherishing. So that notion of self-cherishing refers to the erroneous belief that there could only be comfort and no discomfort, or the belief that there could only be happiness and no sadness, or the belief that there could just be good and no bad. And obviously, that is not how life works. Okay, so when we're so involved with trying to protect ourselves, we are unable to see the pain in another person's face. Self-cherishing is ego fixating and grasping. It ties our hearts, our shoulders, our head, our stomach into knots. We can't open. Everything is in a knot. When we begin to open, we see others and we can be there for them. But to the degree that we haven't worked with our own fear, we're going to shut down when others trigger our fear. This is what self-cherishing does. So the kind of rough definition, this is from the Essential Mind Training text compiled by Thupten Jinpa. It's a really wonderful text. It's not showing up greatly on the screen, but I'll read it to you. The deeply ingrained thought that cherishes the welfare of your own self above all others and makes you oblivious to others' well-being. So the word oblivious is really key here, because a lot of the time self-cherishing isn't looking for ways to hurt others. It's just so wrapped up in itself, it doesn't notice the chaos in its wake. Yeah, you don't notice the impact. And that's different than being obsessed about what people think of you, right? The example I always give is school children after school on public transportation, okay, as my like embodiment of self-cherishing, my mascot, if you will, of self-cherishing. So imagine kids maybe 11 years old with giant backpacks full of books on public transportation. Santa Fe probably doesn't have a lot of public transportation. Anyway, picture them on a bus, all crowded together, laughing, happy about being done with school, clumping onto the bus, finding their seats, and just like knocking people over in their wake with their big backpacks full of books, right? It's not like they mean to knock people over. It's not like when they get up and they turn abruptly, they meant to smack that poor old lady in the face. They're oblivious, right? So we have that characteristic of just knocking people over with our book bag right and left, not meaning to, not intending to, but just so unaware of our impact. And the lack of awareness comes from this self-obsession. So self-cherishing is indifferent to the needs of others or oblivious to the needs of others. You're working for your own welfare, which is not bad by itself, but it's with that added kind of layer of me first, hope you guys are fine, I'm not going to check that. You know that one? So when that one is really up, it taints everything else and the eight worldly concerns roar to the surface. So it's one of these, quote, twin demons, not literal demons, that lie within our heart and serve as the source of all misfortune and downfall. The other twin demon being grasping at selfhood, which is where the self-cherishing comes from. So these two thoughts, self-cherishing and self-grasping, are the primary focus of combat in the mind training practice. Okay, so negative self-cherishing seeks one's own welfare and that of those we consider us and mine, with indifference to others, even at the expense of others. So colloquially, we might say self-absorbed, self-centered, selfish, but it goes deeper and is more fundamental than those descriptions. It's present even when we are being good. Self-grasping fuels it. Okay, so self-grasping, we're going to talk about tomorrow more when we do the Heart Sutra, but just to flag it, it's the instinctively believing in the intrinsic existence of your own self, as well as the external world. Self here means substantial, truly existing identity. The wisdom that realizes emptiness eliminates this self-grasping. Okay, so now we're looking at reliable refuges. Okay, so we talked a little bit about inner belief systems and core values that nourish and uplift, create attitudes and behaviors that seek to benefit. Can be any religion, spiritual tradition, philosophy, or psychology that has these characteristics. And then we look at our context in the Mahayana Buddhist tradition, and from our perspective, refuge is specific to the three jewels, but it doesn't have to be if that's not your cup of tea. But I wanted to explore a little bit about why it is that reliable sources of refuge are the three jewels, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So our refuge is in the three jewels because they are reliable. Why are they reliable? Right? So they are reliable because they are free from fear, skilled in freeing others from fear, unbiased, impartial. They are not preferential. They're not competitive. The Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha are reliable because they're not trapped by the same afflictions we are. So we look at it in the analogous way of the Buddha being like the doctor who says, this way of thinking under the influence of self-cherishing and self-grasping, hurts you. He's just diagnosing, right? You can take it or leave it, right? You're just going to the doctor. You can get a second opinion. It's fine. But he's saying this way of thinking is why you're suffering. If you don't want to suffer anymore, the medicine is the Dharma. And so the actual refuge is the Dharma. The Dharma is the medicine, and it only works if you take it. And it only works if you take it as prescribed, right? You don't want to take too much just because you love it. You don't want to take it occasionally because you'll develop weird tolerances. You don't want to do it the wrong way, right? Take as prescribed the Dharma. Pace yourself. And then the Sangha is like the nurses who help you with that dosage and help you with pacing and help you understand the side effects and kind of relate to you about the triumphs and the pitfalls of working with your own mind. The Sangha is loosely the community itself, more specifically, the monastic monks and nuns, ultimately, anyone who's realized emptiness directly. So when I say emptiness, I mean the emptiness of inherent existence, not nihilism. Okay. So the three jewels are reliable because they work. So it's not like you have to have faith in them in order for them to work. They don't need your faith, right? They're like, whatever, whatever. Right? The Dharma is just tools or just medicine for you to take to train yourself. But you're the one who achieves the health. You're the one who has the strength develop in your mind. No one can take it from you once it's yours. Even if something external was what supported you developing it, It's still your health. It's still this mental continuum's clarity and development. So our refuges towards positive states of mind, like loving kindness, like compassion, like all the classics, you know? And then it's from negative states of mind, like anger and the 8 worldly concerns. And then the tricky part, and this is straight from the Lamrim Chenmo, is because of fear and faith, but fear and faith in what, right? In what our untamed mind can create. And faith in the sense of conviction that the 3 jewels will help. Okay. So when we look at healthy forms of refuge, even if it's not Buddhist refuge, what you want to zoom in is on, are they reliable? Are they reliable? Are they sustainable? Are they things that you can develop such that they protect you? So if you're thinking about the Dharma and you're wondering, oh, does it actually protect me? Well, the question becomes, have you taken the medicine at the appropriate dosage over time? Right? It's like, okay, you take vitamin C once, it helps. But if you take vitamin C often, probably helps more. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. Could be nonsense. Could be placebo. I don't know. But it seems like vitamin C is a good idea. I don't know. The Dharma, however, you can really test it in real time. And you can ask yourself, all right, what's a simple teaching that I understand right away? Compassion's a good idea. Okay. So then you walk into the bank at a time when everybody is grumpy and harassed, and you preempt walking in the door with a real connection to everybody here is probably a little stressed, a little tired, and doesn't want to be here and wants this to be over with quickly. Oh, sentient beings. Yeah. And what's more, they have the freedom, they have the potential for freedom to be free from this suffering once they get through the line, but also once they get through the afflictions in their mind, right? So you go into the bank with compassion and you're testing it out. You're like, is compassion going to protect my mind from the suffering of a stressful bank line? Yeah. And you go in and you're just really holding that mind of compassion the whole time. It's a long line, your legs are getting tired, getting bored. There's weird elevator music playing. It might be Kenny G. We don't like Kenny G, but we wish him well, and you're just kind of like, come on, oh my God. And then you remember compassion, reorient. And you start noticing the people in the line in front of you, and you're like, oh, wow. Look at the way that person kind of leans to the left or leans to the right. I bet they're getting an achy back. Oh, look at that one with the kids. Oh my gosh, that must be exhausting. And you're just noticing the suffering of the people in front of you and really wishing them well. It might be one of those magic times where the people in line turn towards each other and start talking for once. Yeah. And you might have one of those wonderful moments in public where then you all just start chatting, making friends, pointing out the obvious, commenting on the weather. But really, what it is connection. It's not about the content being superficial things like the weather or the pictures on the wall. It's a medium through which to make a connection. Yeah, you could be like, how about that, Kenny G? Huh? I don't know. A little dated. I don't know. And then you have this beautiful experience and you get your errands done or you don't, but at the end of it, you don't have that depleted feeling. Do you know when you've done errands and afterwards you feel completely depleted? And we think the depletion comes from the errand or the fluorescent overhead lighting or grumpy people or this or this or this or this or this. No, it was the mind you brought to those things. It was the mind you brought to those things. Because you can have just a beautiful day with those same conditions if you led with compassion. See how compassion protected you from suffering. Yeah. And how long does it last? Well, as long as you can be focused with it. Yeah. And of course, we can't be focused with positive states of mind for very long because we're not used to them and we don't have great concentration. So then you just kind of reinforce the need to develop your concentration because the better your concentration is, the more it can meet those beautiful attitudes like loving kindness and compassion, hold them steady and give them power. So then concentration's not just about piercing through the veil of relative truth to ultimate truth and cutting the root of samsara. It's also about enjoying errands, right? And those two things are not contradictory, they go together. Yeah. So the importance for concentration to support those positive states of mind, it really just means your medicine has more staying power. Does that make some sense? Questions or thoughts? reliable refuges, being positive states of mind. Questions about that or ideas? Resistance? Yeah. Yeah, Teresa.
And to share a little story related to the bank story.
Story.
One time my sister came home and she said, I just had like the coolest experience coming back from work. And I said, what happened? She's like, I was on the bus and everybody was so tired because everybody was toward the end of the day. And she said there was a screaming baby on the bus. And she said like, everybody was just kind of getting annoyed and tired and, everybody had a headache. And she said, some lady started like searching in her purse for a little lollipop and she found it, she gave it to the baby. And then somebody else came up with like a little toy and she said somebody started singing for the baby and then the whole bus joined in. And she said we had like the coolest ride. So it a little bit was like a story. You said, maybe we start talking to each other. She's like, it totally changed. So that kind of came to my mind when you talked about the back experience.
I love that so much. It's exactly that. And it's also that, what prevents us from always singing to the baby is the outworldly concerns of fear of reputation. Like, what will people think if I'm the eccentric one who sings the lullaby? It's like, but if someone cracks and just does it, how beautiful the experience is for everyone. We just have so much fear and so much shame and just so much self-consciousness that does not serve us, and we could be feeling very connected to humankind wherever we are, and really see the sameness of people, like when you're traveling and you go from country to country and you're like, same people, different accent, same people, different architecture, and you start to really see the way people are very similar. And then you can kind of drop the pretense of like needing to be in your own little castle walking through life. You can just kind of let down the gates. Sing to the baby. Sing to the baby. And if people don't like it, you'll figure it out quite a while. And you're like, sorry, bad call. Never mind.
The baby liked it, actually.
baby liked
Stopped
it.
crying.
The baby liked it. Exactly. Exactly. You maintain your sense of humor, whether it's successful or not.
I like your the idea, am I keeping this too precious? And last night, it's such a great example. I was in the green tar class and I was really enjoying it. And suddenly, I think I'm alone. I hear a man's voice and I see a flashlight outside I'm like, what the hell? And I said, I'm in the middle of a Zoom class. And he said, oh, go back to it. Then this morning, I realized his medication was delivered and the construction worker put it inside the house. He just came in the house to get his freaking medication. But I really felt that. No, I'm in this class and it's very important and you shouldn't interrupt. Anyway, I wanted to share that.
Yeah, it's classic. Thank you for that. It's perfect. Yeah, we all have our version of uptight, and just knowing it, then you see when it starts to rise and you're like, no, not today, but you have to know what you're like. Please.
So as I've been trying to get people who are not Buddhist to understand certain things, like karma, and like the relationship between the karma and the blues, one of the things I've used as a example is, well, it's like gravity. And what have now caused me to expand one other level, that actually the Dharma is for people to understand. We don't understand what reliable is.
Yeah.
But we understand gravity to be reliable. And so now being able to say the Dharma is as reliable as gravity. It is as true as gravity. You don't need to believe in gravity, right? And gravity, of course, is relative, because when we think of gravity, we're earthbound people. We're really understanding gravity to be pointing to the center of this earth.
Yeah.
But if you went outside of this earth, gravity is completely different than that too. But somehow just this idea of a visceral, understandable, common, universal experience of dependability may be something that can help us understand the difference between what is reliable and what is unreliable.
Yeah, that's a nice connection. It's a really nice connection. you know, when you're looking at refuge and you're thinking, okay, the Dharma is the refuge, and really that means developing positive states of mind, protect me from negative states of mind, and then the suffering that follows. Okay, that's the summary of the whole day. If you think, oh, positive states of mind protect me, what can happen if you've been exposed to a lot of other strategies in your life is that you start to think of it as like positive thinking. You know, like if I look in the mirror and I do some good mirror work or some good gestalt therapy, I'm going to think, yeah, I'm good enough and I'm smart enough and people like me and yes, I am. And it starts to feel cheesy and hokey and dated and cringy and not deep. Yeah. And Dharma is not that kind of positive thinking. And yet, that kind of positive thinking, if you were able to bear the cringe, might be fairly effective. And for some people, it is. You know, and so then that's kind of humbling. You're like, oh, here's my whole sophisticated psychology and my whole sophisticated philosophy and my whole amazing esoteric ancient religion. And it's kind of the same as, you know, a cheerleader looking in the mirror going, you've got this, girl. Right? Like embarrassing, right? But it might be just as effective. How embarrassing. Depends on the mind you bring to it, right? Depends on the mind you bring to it. So what we want to do is like not take ourselves too seriously about any of this because we only have a certain capacity each day, each moment, and it changes throughout the day and throughout the lifetime. And so if you're holding yourself up to a standard of practice that was within all conditions were perfect, you will never measure up because conditions are not always perfect. You have to really measure yourself about what is my capacity today, and can I really cultivate one positive mind to protect me from harming others, to protect me from falling into the eight worldly concerns, to protect me from suffering. And it might be that there is some sort of pain happening, but I don't suffer from it in the same way. Yeah. Just as, you know, if you're in the mood to go out in the snow, the cold does not bother you. If you have to go out in the snow, you're annoyed by it. Same temperature, same snow, right? You know, really taking back how much power you have in your mind to change your circumstances, to change your experience. So, similar to the eight worldly concerns, now let's look personally, and let's do this as a reflection this time instead of as a discussion. And if you like, you can do it as a journal exercise. Let's just sit with, personally, in my own inner life, my own heart practices, my own well-being and development, what is my spiritual refuge and how will I connect to it? And try not to be too good kid at school and say, the Dharma is my refuge. Be specific when I say the Dharma, when I say positive states of mind. How do you hear that through the lens of your own wisdom? What ways of thinking are refuges? And knowing those kind of positive states of mind, beneficial states of mind that keep you steady, uplifted, and open. How will I connect to it? What are the strategies for inviting it back? What do you say to yourself? So coming out of reflection, how did you make it personal? What specifics? What ways of thinking are refuges? Does anyone feel comfortable to share? What ways of thinking are refuges? And how do you connect to them? Yeah, please. Nina's coming. Nina's running. Thank you so much.
I think it's, for me, it's one word, compassion.
Yeah.
Learning, starting with oneself and then going outward in circles. And that's hard.
Yeah.
I mean, I was shocked to learn that the Dalai Lama and other Tibetans aren't familiar with the concept of self-loathing and self-blame. That was amazing to me because it's so common.
Yeah, absolutely.
So learning to give oneself and others compassion.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah, please.
It's easy as we pass the mic to each other. For me, it was being as present when I get off the cushion as I've worked to be when I was on the cushion,
Yeah.
and to have be open. I like the fact that you added to curiosity kindness, to have curiosity with kindness, finally with the idea that there is nothing that's going to come up that's true, that is harmful. There's only the absence of truth that is harmful. So if I can put those three things together, then I think that's how I can make it personal.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah, just pass it around.
I was listening to, and I found out that for me is stop talking, start listening. That's the best thing I've done, and with my silence retreat, and it helped me to look at others people
Yeah.
closely.
Beautiful. Yeah.
For me, it was just a couple of weeks ago, I was in intensive care for about 7 days. And when I woke up in intensive care, I felt so joyful that I was alive. And I kept that joy and I projected it. And everybody who came in, I just looked at them as being so kind to me.
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And they would take my blood and I would say, that was nice. I didn't feel anything, it was like we fed on each other
Yeah.
for those whole 7 days.
Yeah.
It just changed the whole experience into something that was quite enjoyable.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's a perfect example. And it really feels like magic when that happens. It's just amazing. Beautiful. Well, thank you guys. Let's just kind of let that percolate a little bit. Let's have a short, like 5-minute break, and then we'll have our final session and call it a day. So let's have a 5-minute break and we'll keep going. Thank you so much. So looking at all of this, it can be heavy, it can be intriguing, it can be enlivening, it can be tiring. Just kind of be with whatever your experience of this content is, and see if you can keep this kind of flexible, creative mind that's curious and kind. Yeah. And then when we're shifting to thinking about, all right, what do I do with healthy refuge awareness when I'm thinking of my family? When I'm thinking about what the folks in my life need, how do I help them without proselytizing, without being a missionary, without pushing religion on them, without being, a bit unskillful? So knowing the benefit of connecting with a spiritual refuge will help me with my family to what, do you think? Now we'll do it in discussion style. So thinking refuge, what do I do with this concept when I think of my family? In a way that's not obnoxious. Anyone feel comfortable to share some thoughts coming up? We'll talk a little bit about what we don't want. Like, have you ever had a friend who's got a new diet that's really working for them and they want to tell everyone? They're like, you guys, Atkins, this is the way, it's Atkins. No, we're going to be paleo. Paleo is the way. They get so excited about their diet and they want everyone to do their diet. And their diet might, in fact, be working quite well for them and is got some solid science or some solid discipline or whatever. Nothing wrong with it per se. And then they're kind of assuming that's going to be everybody's way to health. And even if it might be, even if their magic diet is just like eat more vegetables, which, you know, top secret, that's probably the best thing we can do, just eat more vegetables. Pro tip. But, you know, even if it is a good diet, you know, you don't really feel like listening to them when they're on a soapbox, right? Even if they're right, you don't really want to listen, right? So how do we take an awareness of actually actively taking the reins of my mind and directing it towards compassion, kindness, patience, etc., really is the medicine my mind needs to protect it from suffering. Now, family, do the same. No. But what's a way to skillfully kind of invite that same wisdom in a way that is not condescending, that's not patronizing? Can you kind of think of someone in your family who likes to talk about ideas? Or maybe would be in the mood to talk about ideas sometimes in the right setting. You know, like maybe you go for a hike, and at first the hike is about relationships and politics and weather. But then after a fashion, it can go a little deeper into ideas. Do you have, you know, you've got a friend or family member like that, where like once you get the surface kind of news out of the way, you can go to the depths. What do you think you could do to help invite healthy refuge in your family members without being a missionary? Yeah, Nina, please.
Well, I think that nobody knows us better than our family. So even without saying a word, if it's working, they will know. And they
Yeah.
may ask questions. And if it's not, then we don't have to say anything, because whatever we say will not go very deeply and will be just on the surface, because they will just look at you and they will be like, well, you're just as angry as you were 10 years ago. So, you know,
That Buddhism sure
not
ain't
talked
helping.
about this Buddhist stuff,
Yeah.
you know, fad or whatever. So I think, I guess what I'm trying to say is maybe best way to do it is by example and not so much about explaining, unless somebody has a question, you know, if somebody wants to know something, that there's nothing wrong, I guess. But I think that going around and being a missionary is luckily not a domain of Buddhism per se. Like we don't have that vow.
We actively discourage, actively discourage.
Correct. And I
Yes.
think there's for a good reason.
Yeah. My friends will be like, I want to be a Buddhist. I'm like, you know, maybe just get some therapy. We'll circle back. Or maybe a rescue dog. Maybe a rescue dog is the answer, actually, for you. It'll be easier, trust me. Oh, it'll suck you in and it'll become your whole life. Oh, wait, that's just me. But it is showing by example is so much more powerful than we realize. And I think that we need to give ourselves more credit for the transformation we have had already and the impact it has on our family already. And also the knowing that they won't actually realize how hard won our progress is. So, you know, I often say this to the folks in Oregon that, you know, if you were to ask my parents, how am I different than I was before I started practicing Buddhism? And I started practicing Buddhism when I was 12, right? So it's been some time. They would probably say, she seems a little happier and a little nicer after, you know, 30 years, right? A little nicer and a little happier. But they don't actually understand how hard won that kindness and that contentment is, because what they're actually reflecting without even realizing it is that my baseline increased. Yeah. So, you know, there's like our baseline contentment that we have when things aren't going too difficult. You know, that kind of baseline of here's me on a, you know, kind of easy cruisy day. And here's me when I'm with people, when I'm kind of friendly. Just leveling that up a little is a triumph, but it might not seem like anything in particular to the people who have known you your whole life. They might just appreciate you're a little easier to be with now. Thanks for doing the dishes. Right. And you know, that's a little humbling, but you know how amazing it is to be happier, to be kinder than you used to be as your natural default. So you can only really compare to yourself in the past. But the modeling of even, well, but they are a little happier and a little nicer. It does give them some curiosity. What are you doing in there in those Buddhist centers? What are you doing in there on your meditation cushion? What is going on there? It makes them curious. And then over time, sometimes they will ask questions. And if they don't, they don't. You know, everyone's got their own journey. But also remembering that you probably don't love unsolicited advice. So too others may not like unsolicited advice. So even if it's the most perfect wisdom there could ever be, force feeding it is not usually effective. So modeling, leading by example is huge. The other piece of working with family is also just maintaining your refuge when you're with them a little more intentionally. Because when you're with people who are so used to you and your ways and have certain assumptions about you and your behavior, it's very easy for you to slip into old ways that were less healthy. Even if normally you're not that anymore, just by being around your family, you slip. Yes, you know this one, the family slip. So if you can level up your refuge prior to entry into the family dinner, it actually will have such a benefit on them and a benefit on you if you're really intentional about it. I am a huge fan of a car meditation once you've parked, right? So park, do a meditation for 1 minute, 2 minutes, reconnect with your refuge, really reconnect with your refuge, and just decide what's going to be your orienting touchstone of a practice when you're with these people that you know and love. Is it going to be compassion? Is it going to be a mantra? What's it going to be? Patience? Pick. You can't really do a wrong pick if it's a Dharma pick. Just pick one. That's what I'm going to lead with as I enter into this situation, this event. So it's just bring a little bit more intentionality to these moments where it's easier to get caught off guard. And you might even picture a couple of kind of difficult dynamics in your family where you might slip and preempt it with, okay, I know I'm going to get triggered by so-and-so when they say such and such. And this time I'm going to just shut up. You have a tiny plan held by compassion. Something like this. Do you have any other family thoughts about using it, please, Lou?
Yeah, I have a monthly Zoom call with my brothers and sisters. We've been doing it for, ever since Zoom became a thing. And if they, we talk about our problems and everything. And if there is something that I think I can help with, I always say that I know it's helped me, and I tell them that. And the other thing I noticed is that after a couple of years, my brother looked at me and said, you were always the serious one. Now you're always laughing. So I thought that was good.
If I get it. Absolutely. And then when we switch to then kind of like, I don't know, professionally or communally or in these kind of like next circle out from intimate, an awareness of and benefit of having spiritual refuge will help me professionally in what way? And it pretty much boils down to the same thing as with family. It's just a slightly different setting. Really thinking, okay, certain situations I get pulled off guard more easily. Let's make sure I'm particularly connected to my practice when going to the grocery store or whatever it is that triggers you, or going to the doctor's office, somewhere where you get anxious or something. But you're really thinking about your refuge for them. Yeah, you want to be thinking your refuge for you quite a lot. Yeah, so you really understand how to protect your mind from negative states. And then really consciously realize you being grounded has such an impact, has such a ripple effect. you know what it's like to be around someone who is grounded in their spiritual path. Yeah. I think about how much I love interfaith panels, because when I'm with like rabbis and priests and imams and various spiritual leaders, I can feel this kinship of all of us having effort in altruism. Even if it's completely different words, completely different context, there's just that kind of, and when you come to the Dharma Center and you know that anyone in this room you could have a deep conversation with. Right? Then what we want to say to ourselves is, if we can have a deep conversation, let's try to. Because there's so many people in our life who we just can't have a deep conversation with. We can have depth of connection, we can have depth of love, but the content may remain sports, right? Right? It might, and that's okay. There's some people in your life, it's going to stay sports. That's all right. Go Dodgers. I don't know, sports, whatever. But there are people in your life who you can explore meaning, purpose, depth, reality, get into these things. So when you're thinking about bringing refuge into the communal setting, it's kind of consciously like nurturing where there is depth and trying to like, okay, let's do it. And being brave enough to be not an expert. Hey, when you do refuge, what do you think about? That refuge prayer we do every class or we do every prayer. Do you pause sometimes halfway through and do refuge for a bit and then pause and do bodhicitta for a bit? Do you sometimes just do one and not the, what do you do? Do you sometimes mix it up and use a different version? What do you do? What if it gets stale? What happens? Just kind of like being able to go there with people is really special. And so sometimes refuge and community just boils down to that. Any additions? Additions or ideas? Much talking. Okay. All right. So then if you want to be a Buddhist or you already are a Buddhist, you could opt to take some vows to support protecting your mind from suffering. Yeah. It's really different if you frame it that way. Vows are to protect your mind from suffering. Vows are to protect you from hurting other people. Yeah, vows are like guide rails to keep you from going off the edge. And they're usually things that you already think are a good idea, right? You're not needing to be convinced. You already think they're a good idea. And now you're doing them on purpose, intentionally, forever. So ways of supporting your refuge, in our tradition, refuge is one ceremony, like becoming a Buddhist. And that's really saying the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha are my primary source of spiritual refuge. And then taking vows is a separate. So we call them pradamoksha vows, or vows of individual liberation. But the individual liberation vows are informed by kindness, compassion, ethics, etc. And they're the basis that we build then bodhisattva and tantric vows on top of. So lay people can take vows, and of course monastics take vows. They won't let Venerable Jundrup and me have any more vows. We've tapped out. They've cut us off. We're not allowed anymore. Done. But you guys have more available to you should you want, but you may have to cut your hair. Okay, here are your classics, right? Okay, so these are for lay people, and like they're nice. Yeah, some of you probably have them or have some combination of them already. But imagine if everyone had these vows, just these vows, or just the first one. What if we all just had the vow not to kill? How beautiful the world would be, right? How much just that intention to refrain from harm and to protect would change the whole atmosphere of the world. So if you're someone who already has refuge vows or is thinking about it, to really think of this as a gift to humanity. Having vows like this, it stands in direct opposition to all these people who are as if meditating on killing through the repeated hatred thoughts in their mind. This helps counter all of that negative, violent, aggressive energy. It's incredibly powerful. So these guys, for 1 through 4, you need quite a dramatic action to break them at the root. So if you accidentally step on an ant, you're not breaking this killing vow at the root. You have to engage in homicide on purpose, right? Stealing, something legally punishable. So if you took the pen from the bank, not ideal, but you're not going to break this vow at the root. Lying is about attainments. So if someone says to you, does my butt look fat in these jeans? And it does, but you say no, you're not breaking this vow at the root. Okay? For example, okay? It's lying about your spiritual path or your spiritual attainments, and that's very, very heavy, but you have to kind of do it on purpose, yeah. And then sexual misconduct, generally speaking, is adultery. And the question that usually comes up in Western communities is, what about really horrible things like abuse? And those are sort of like out of the frame of things that would happen in a healthy adult relationship. So it doesn't really go in this category. It's just so not okay. We're not even needing to spell it out. So there can be some kind of friction of, well, shouldn't rape be in there? Shouldn't child abuse be in there? What do you mean adultery? Those are just consenting adults, you know, it's betrayal and it's not nice, but it's not like the worst thing. The reason it's there is because it has the potential to break apart families and break trust. If everybody's okay with it, that's another kettle of fish. Live your polyamorous lifestyle, you know, consenting adults. I don't know what y'all get up to, but be good. But, you know, if we're talking about sexual misconduct, really, we're talking about adultery because of those reasons, not because it's like the worst of the worst. Worst of the worst kind of goes without saying. Does that make sense? And then no intoxicants is a branch because intoxication and intoxicants is not a natural misdeed, right? Like alcohol is ethically neutral, but under the influence of alcohol, it's much easier to do the other four, right? So it's a branch that supports you keeping the other four. So if you ever want to take a refuge ceremony where you're taking the precepts of a layperson, you can choose which one of these to take, or all of them, or whatever combination. And some lamas who give refuge will say no intoxicants means this, and some will say some it means that. So for example, Lama Yeshe very famously said, if it's going to annoy your family to not drink at dinner, have 1 glass of wine is okay, but don't drink to intoxication. Other lamas will say nothing at all. So you have to kind of know what the lama is doing when they give that particular vow. Okay, so those are just supports. And it's important to know that if you do take refuge, you're taking it from someone and you're making a karmic connection with that person. There are lots of types of Dharma teacher. The type of Dharma teacher relationship that you're making when you take refuge is fundamental vehicle. So you're seeing them as like a spiritual friend, a spiritual mentor, a guide on the path. You're not seeing them as a Buddha necessarily, unless you take higher vows. So that's good to know for refuge vows. So like this just quick review. Okay, how are the relationships formed? So fundamental vehicle, if you get refuge, if you get pradamoksha vows, also a conversation, right? So if you want someone to become your teacher on this sutra level, on this introductory level, you can also just ask for an appointment and say, will you be my teacher? You can ask up to 3 times. If they say no 3 times, you gotta let it go. Shift gears. Perfection vehicle is when you get bodhisattva vows from someone, or the 8 Mahayana precepts, or you receive a formal oral transmission, which is like called a lung, of a specifically Mahayana text, like the 8 verses of thought transformation. And here you do need to start seeing the teacher as like the Buddha, and it really is a much more significant relationship. But the super duper relationship is the Vajra vehicle. That's when you're seeing the teacher literally as the Buddha, at least in your meditation session in the sadhana, you're seeing them as one with the Buddha. So that's not something to be taken lightly, obviously, because it's rather, but also very powerful. So all of this is to say, if you want things to support reliable refuge, there are tools out there. And also it's very individual. This is your life, this is your mind, this is your path. And sitting with what are the healthy thoughts in my mind? How do I strengthen them? What are the unhealthy thoughts in my mind? How do I decrease my attachment to them? This is really what we want to take home with us, is really becoming curious about those repetitive trains of thought and then curating your own mental experience. Yeah. Editing your own mental experience, augmenting your own mental experience. and really doing that with some intention. Do you have any questions before we call it a day? Good. Good. Okay. Thank you so much for your attention, and hope it's good food for thought for you. So we'll dedicate. Dei sala pasho janju semjorim boshe mage panam ge yuchi ge panyam pa me payam gone gondu pelwasho. Kari rawe kowe shinkam dear pendang dewa manu zhongwei ne chen rezi wan tenzin gatsoi shape si te badu ten yu chi. Okay, thank you very much. And we'll do part 2 of this series in a couple of weeks on a Saturday, and it'll be all about joyous effort, which is burnout prevention and burnout recovery in your spiritual path. What? 1 week, in 1 week, Saturday, 1 week. Happy holidays, or see you tomorrow.